Welcome to the Memories. You are inside the last video store, the show where we talk to interesting people about some of their favorite movies. I am your host and your movie guru, Alexi Toliopoulos, and our guest on the show today is one of my very favorite filmmakers from Australia. They are the first Oscar winner to sit in the seat here at the last video store. We've got Adam Elliot, HARVIE KRUMPET himself. Adam Elliot is on the show. I'll never forget that moment when he won the Oscar, and we're going to talk to him about that moment too for HARVIE KRUMPET. He also directed Mary and Max, which I think is one of the 5 best films from Australia of this century so far, the 21st century I'm speaking about. And I think it's also Philip Seymour Hoffman's best performance in anything, and it's in a vocal role. Beautiful film. His new film, Memoir of a Snail, is just as beautiful, just as touching, just as powerfully melancholy reflection, chronicle of life about a young girl growing up in the foster care system in Australia. Huge recommendation from me. See it in the cinema. It is so beautiful, so textured. He is like one of the great claymation artists of our time. He calls it clayography, which I think is so beautiful. And we're going to get into his favorite films, but joining me before we do that, we've got our dearest producer stocking the shelves here. We've got Emmeline. How are you, dude?
I'm good, Alexi. Feeling good after that interview. It was fantastic.
Wow. The praise coming in early on the podcast. Thank you so much. And I was not pressuring you to say anything about it at all. So
Stop kicking me under the table, by the way.
I'm trying to say more good things about me, please. Say more. But it was very cool to get Adam Elliot in here. But we're going to talk about some of his favorite movies. We're going to do a new release, 2 weeklies, and then I'm going to give him a recommendation based on his taste. And if you want a recommendation, send us in a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, comment, wherever you're getting this from, and I'll give you a recommendation based on your taste. We got one in. Emmeline, read it out to us.
This is from She Beheadings.
Wow, very grim. Very grim, She Beheadings.
Miss Beheading says, it works. Great recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
What would you recommend for someone who loves shame and loves drowning by numbers?
Wow, I'm hoping they're talking about the movie Shame, but yes. I'm not going to shame anyone for whatever they're into here. But Peter Greenaway, Drowning by Numbers, I'm going to just quickly, I'll give 2. I'm going to give 2. One of them, I'm going to say, Drowning by Numbers. It is about 3 generations of women, and it is about murder and intrigue. Another film that ticks those boxes, we have already talked about on this podcast, the Goran Stolevski episode. We talked about Volver by Pedro Almodovar, one of my favorite films. If you've never seen that, now's your extra chance to do so. And Peter Greenaway, another film recommendation from him because it's quite easy to access these days in a very beautiful form. The Cook, the Thief, his wife, and her lover. Beautiful film, super unique. Absolutely check it out. Have you seen either of those, Emmeline?
No, one of these days you're going to say recommendation and I'm going to say, I've already seen that one. But actually, I won't give it away, obviously, but your recommendation for Adam is fantastic and I love the film.
One of your favorites, right?
Yeah, I loved it and I haven't really heard anyone else talk about it. I try to recommend it to people and they don't know what I'm talking about. So I was stoked to hear you recommend that to him.
Well, hopefully Adam fucking watches it, dude. That way we get one of those recommendations out there into the world.
Yep, highly recommended. You got to listen to the end now.
Oh, okay. Now that's why the producer. You got that tease. You got that sizzle going on. So stay tuned to the end to see what happens in our discussion with Oscar winner Adam Elliot.
The last video store.
Adam, tell me about this video store that is in the family.
Look, I was very lucky that my Uncle Norm, just before he passed away,
A perfect uncle name, by the way. One of the great uncle names.
Uncle Norm Barr. Actually, his brother was called Richard Barr, which is Dick Barr, so, work that out. But
another great uncle name.
Great name. And he was pretty despondent with his 2 lazy sons, and he had a lot of money himself, so he bought them a video store.
Oh, wow.
At the Fountain Gate Shopping Centre in just out on the outer suburbs of Melbourne. Fountain Gates, like it's Kath and Kim reinvented that to become Fountain Lakes. So it was a real video store. But then, of course, not long after that, they all started disappearing. And so, now one of them's an accountant and God knows what the other one is.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, we had one in the family.
Wow. Well, now you've arrived here in Batuta, the last video store here. And we're going to be talking about some of your favorite movies today, Adam. But I'm going to say this, you're one of my favorite filmmakers, so I'm very excited to have you here.
Thank you.
And it's one of those core memories for, I think, Australians around my age, is seeing you win that freaking Oscar for HARVIE KRUMPET. And I'll never forget, two coolest things. You thank your boyfriend, which was so cool. And then the next thing, to say that you're screening the film at 9:30 p.m. on SBS.
Oh, yes.
It felt like a very direct message to people around, like in Australia.
It was the best plug SBS has ever had.
It must be.
Although we found out later afterwards that SBS at the same time was a adult porn channel in Amsterdam or something.
Wow.
So there was a lot of people tuning in.
Well, for a lot of people, it was an adult film TV channel here in Australia as well, I'd say.
Yes.
Yeah, quite in sync, I'd say there.
Yeah. No, it was a big, how long ago was that? 20 years ago? None of it was expected. And actually, after we won, someone said to me, well, it's all downhill from here and you got nothing to aim for.
Hey, what a wonderful trip downhill, though, I'd say. What a wonderful trip. Well, let's get into it. I'm dying to talk to you about some of your favorite flicks. Come on back, we'll talk through them, but let's get into a new release film.
New release.
It's one of your films as well, and I'm going to give you the distinct honor before we even announce what it is, because we do not have an animation category here. I do not think of animation as a genre. I think of it as a form and a media.
Good.
So where would you like to place your film here in the store? Which section?
Well, actually, when HARVIE KRUMPET came out on DVD, Madman had a tough time trying to work out where to put it, and it ended up in all the sections.
I think in the video store I worked at, we did have an Australian section, but I think we had it in like an art house cult film section as well.
That's okay. Better than the $2 bin, which is where it sometimes ends up.
Yeah, how about this one? Where we're going to place Memoir of a Snail in the store?
Well, good. I'm so glad you said animation's not a genre. Which Guillermo del Toro said that in his, I think in his Oscar speech for Pinocchio. And I've been fighting that, for 30 years. I've been telling people, no, it's a medium, and I still get emails today from angry parents saying, your films aren't for children. And already with this film, they're already dragging their children suddenly out of the cinema when the orgy scene happens. A lot more nudity than like the Disney kids or Transformers 1 kids are probably used to these days. This is the thing, and it's it is rated M, so surely the adults should do a bit of research. But then again, they all then go home and play all these violent video games. So you figure it out. I can't work it out.
So what do we reckon? Comedy, drama?
I'm hoping
some amorphous place in between.
I think I always hope for comedy, but it always ends up in drama because I certainly like making people cry, and I love poignant moments and teary moments. But ultimately, what I'm hoping for, especially when I'm in the audience in a cinema, is them laughing at the right spots. So yes, comedy.
Comedy.
Let's go. It's in comedy. Let's talk about it. Memoir of a Snail, your new film. It is this beautiful kind of portrait film that is kind of this melancholy chronicle of life, which I think is just something that you do so well about an outsider growing up in Australia in like the foster care system.
Yes.
But I think what really resonates to me is that I think you use melancholy in the truest sense, where it is this feeling, but it's not a negative feeling. It's kind of tinged in hopefulness and silver linings. How would you define that kind of feeling of melancholy?
Well, look, there's that quote, I think Victor Hugo said, melancholy is the happiness of being sad. And I think that's what links all my films together, is that there is this happy, sad, duality of comedy, tragedy, humour, pathos. And I like going to the extremes of both. So there's also, I love quotes, obviously I collect quotes, but there's another one. Tom Ryan, the film critic, said this to me a few years ago. He said, Adam, the thing about your films is that it's that saying, without the dark, the light has no meaning. So I really drag my protagonists through the mud, and I really am quite cruel to them, but I do reward them for all their suffering at the end. So look, it's a bit wanky, but it's that trying to reflect real life, because all our lives are roller coasters. They're never completely miserable, nor are they perpetually happy. So it's just trying to get that balance. I think what it is too, because stop motion, of course, Wallace and Gromit, and we're all brainwashed by all the animation we watched as kids, thinking it is a genre. But why can't plasticine animated films deal with challenging subject matter? Why can't you have a character attempting suicide, and why can't you have a gay conversion scene that's harrowing and disturbing? So I think it's I've always seen the job of a writer and a director, or an auteur, as they call me in France.
We'll call it to you here as well.
It's our job to push the boundaries and give the audience something unique and original, because we've all, like yourself, I'm a cinephile. I watch everything, I consume everything, and a lot of it just gets a bit samey and predictable and formulaic. So I don't want to be one of those filmmakers. I want to be somebody who's not shocking, or I don't want to offend the audience, but I want to challenge them.
I think it is that challenge that kind of creates like that sticky reflection kind of feeling. And I think you've used this term clayography about kind of using claymation and plasticine characters to reflect, but also like have biographical and kind of almost factual filmmaking elements and taken from the real world. Can you kind of tell us a bit about like the genesis point for Memoir of a Snail?
Yeah, well, look, all my films are based on my family and friends, and I'm not very good at just inventing characters from thin air. So, I'm a human sponge. I look around at my family.
I wasn't going to bring that up. I did notice you were a sponge walking in here.
And, my family always look back at me nervously thinking, am I going to be in the next film? But I don't have to
look like a deranged little grey character one day?
I don't have to look far. I mean, maybe I'm just surrounded with more eccentric people than the average person is, but I certainly look for people's peculiarities and what makes them different, even if they're trying to hide their peculiarities. But I stare at people on public transport. I'm always observing, and I'm always writing down notes. Even today, I've written down a few notes, and when I go to write, I go to my journals and notebooks as if they're like giant recipe books. And I'll go through, and there'll be something I'd written 15 years ago. So for Memoir of a Snail, I remember going through my book and I came across guinea pigs mating. I thought, I want to have that somewhere in the film. So I put that in the list. So I pluck all these ingredients, and then it's a matter of somehow stringing them all together and hoping by the third or fourth draft there's a 3-act structure magically appearing. But then I do a lot of draft. By the 16th draft, I sort of know what's going on. But I'm a slow writer, very fussy, and sadly, I've become self-conscious. I look back at when I was younger and I wrote, it was very intuitive and from instinct, and it's just one of those professions. As you get older, it actually weirdly gets harder, and you're constantly trying to do what you did 20 years ago when you were full of angst and you were pure and the emotion was real, and now we're all old and, I don't know.
Do you think it's like that self-consciousness coming through because you share so much of yourself in your work as well?
Yeah, I think that the films have become cathartic devices for me. So I put in all the things I'm frustrated about. And I've been saying in interviews in the last couple of days that, for me to start writing a screenplay, I do have to be agitated or frustrated or angry even about something. And with this film, I was angry at my parents because my father died and he had left behind this huge collection of stuff. I wouldn't say he was an extreme hoarder. I call him a mild hoarder.
A mild hoarder.
I was like, why do Mum and Dad, why do they have all this stuff? Why are we bowerbirds and we just consume and collect, and I'm just as much to blame. I up until 4 or 5 years ago, I collected bad taxidermy, and I lived in this old warehouse full of really bad taxidermy. But I got rid of it, and I
Have you kept any little pieces of taxidermy?
No. I even had a piranha's head embalmed in plastic. But no, I put everything on eBay. My partner and I, we did what you probably would do when you retire, and that's downsized. But we did it in our early 50s. Yeah.
Hey, something for us all to aspire to, I guess, is we all have to downsize eventually.
Yes, and dying is the ultimate downsizing. So, yeah.
I really want to talk to you about characterization because I think it's one of those things that fascinates me most about animation because it is such a really pure form of cinema. Everything does come from you to a certain extent. When it comes to character, how does it come to finding the voice for a character and also designing them completely? What can you talk us through a bit about that process?
Well, unlike live action, we have to create everything. And, I am the production designer, so I design the look of all the characters and then get my sculptors to sculpt them. So, yeah, it's a slow process. Again, I'm always staring at real people trying to think, what is it about that person I want to instill in this character? But no, I don't know. They become very real people to me, very believable. And as a production designer, I'm actually aspiring for imperfection. And a lot of stop motion has become too refined. They're reliant too much on 3D printers. So I'm looking for,
The handcrafted quality?
Yes, the fingerprints.
Yeah.
And actually some of our prop makers in the first couple of weeks started making stuff and it was too good. And I would say, can you
scale down?
Can you make it worse? or we drop it on the ground or I'd rough it up a bit. So it's that saying to the audience that what you're looking at is handmade. And because we are all drowning in CGI, that stop motion's going through a bit of a renaissance at the moment, and Guillermo del Toro and Wes Anderson, they're all dabbling in stop motion, and that's great. I'm glad they are, but I think that the pendulum is sort of swinging back to handmade. It's the same reason why suddenly DVDs are popular again, and cassettes, and it's that something tangible and tactile. And on my new film, Madmen have just got me to do a DVD commentary.
Oh, wow.
And I thought they were dead, but they've come back, and that is, and apparently I was just at the Randwick Ritz with Eddie Tamir, who runs it, and he was telling me their audience now is skewing more young.
Yeah.
And that really gives me hope that, because when I left film school in 1996, I was told that cinema was a dying art form. I mean, imagine having that on your shoulders your whole career.
At film school as well?
Yeah, at film school. That and even stop motion, that'll be gone in 5 years. Computers will kill that. And the opposite's happened. We're going through this wonderful period. I don't know how long it'll last.
Well, my estimate is forever. That's my estimate here
Let's
today.
just hope, the AI won't come and destroy us all.
I really like what you're saying about that. There's something about the artifice of film and being able to find that tangible quality that I think it's, especially for people that are, just finding cinema is as the medium that they're falling in love with. I think being able to see those, as you say, fingerprints in your work, but even just being able to see even the director's hand at work, or those kind of artificial feelings of a set. I think there's something that's really powerful because it makes you understand what you're seeing is work, what you're seeing is craft.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think of films in recent years like The Holdovers that had that very 70s aesthetic, and they even added in digital film grain and old-fashioned dissolves. And, I know students even putting in... Do you remember gate hairs? These little hairs that would appear between the camera lens and the celluloid, and we used to scream when they appeared, and
now
scratches.
you miss them. You miss those little hairs up on the screen.
Film students are putting them in digitally, and that's lovely. I really like it, because it's...
That would be my dream cameo in a film, from one of my hairs to be placed on a frame of a film one day.
Well, actually, that reminds me, and I'm sorry if going on a tangent.
No, please, tangent.
In the film, in the very opening montage, there's a little tiny jar you spot just near the bathtub. And in that jar is one of our animators' fingertips. And what happened was she was making some sort of prop, and she was using a knife, a Stanley knife or something, and she accidentally chopped off the top of her finger. It landed on the ground. We couldn't find it. She was bleeding. We raced it to the doctors and da-da-da. Anyway, 3 days later, we found the fingertip. I thought, what are we going to do with this? So someone said, let's put it in a little jar. So we did, and stuck a cork in it. And I said, well, now what are we going to do? Well, let's put it in the film. So it appears throughout the film.
Beautiful.
It's Donna's fingertip.
Well, I hope Donna's credited nice and gloriously with that fingertip in there. Little IMDb extra credit.
It is a little cookie.
What's going on with the fingertip now?
We've lost
Is
it
it in
actually.
your exhibit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're having an exhibition at Acme down in Melbourne at Fed Square, and there's a whole lot of the props in there.
It could be in there.
I'm hoping it is. I don't know where it is, and yeah, it's a shame.
One thing I want to ask you, like in that area of characterization, one of my best mates, Tony Armstrong, who's been in this store as well, he is in this film. And I spoke to him, I think when he got the call up for the part, I think I was either with him or around him.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you about your method of picking actors, because he said that he was a rather late addition to the film and he didn't have a script as well.
No, there's this character called Ken. I won't give it away, and we'd already designed Ken, made Ken, animated Ken. But I couldn't decide on who the voice should be.
I think you picked a rather perfect voice with
exactly.
Tony. When I heard it come through on the screen, I was like, okay, here we go.
Well, I was watching ABC Breakfast TV, and Tony came on, and I, of course, knew who Tony was. But then I saw his mustache and the voice. You know, he's like a porn star. He's just got that, all those and those eyes, those dreamy eyes. And I thought, oh, he has to be Sarah Snook's love interest. And weirdly, they lived close to each other.
They live across the road from each other, he said. Yeah.
And so, Tony was wonderful.
So how does it come in because with animation, I always think, voices must come first and then you make the characters' mouths move in time with the voices. How does someone come so late into a film that must take a long time to make?
Yeah, look, it's what we call post-syncing or pickups, and it is much harder for the actor to come in. I mean, we put their animation up on the big screen, they look at it, and then they try and sync it to camera. And it's really tricky, and that's why we generally record the voices first and then mould the animation around it and make all the little mouths and things. But Tony, there was a lot of Tony stuff is actually off camera, so it didn't matter.
And a lot of groans and moans to not give away too much stuff.
No, poor old Ken. He's a very damaged person.
As all other the Adam Elliot characters, I'd say, which is what makes them beautiful.
I don't think Tony's seen the film yet, so I hope he remembers what his character is. He's got a bit of a fetish.
That's to say the very least. Well, that is one final thing that I actually really want to talk to you about is there is, in the rest of your pile, I'm looking ahead, there are no other animation films. But what were the animated films that kind of inspired you on your journey to become a creator?
Well, like I love Eastern European animation. Again, not for children. In Estonia, there's animators there's one guy called Prit Pan who's a surrealist animator who's done all these fantastic films about carrots that don't make any sense, but beautiful and very alluring. But then
is that a Czech film, the Pied Piper?
Not Jan Schwankmeyer, because that's who I was about to say.
Yeah.
He's Czech. Yeah, so he made a lot of his films under communist rule. He did a wonderful feature version of Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, yes.
With bones and meat. And I remember seeing that as a teenager thinking, wow, that's what I want to do. What's that called? Stop motion. So, but to be honest, I don't watch Disney, Pixar. I didn't, even as a kid, I wasn't really watching Disney. I loved Roadrunner. I loved where there was a lot of violence. So, Roadrunner had plenty of that. But also British animation, the Magic Roundabout. And, now we all know that a lot of the animation made in England in the 60s and 70s, they're all on LSD. So that's why it was so fabulous. I mean, shows like H.R. Puff and stuff, and they took a lot more risks back then, and then suddenly everything got very safe. But then
there's a lot of house style, I'd say, to a lot of
But then luckily, Simpsons came along, and then South Park, and revitalised that sort of adult aspects to animation. So I think animation's in a really healthy state. I mean, this year there's some incredible films. There's a beautiful film called Flow. The Inside Out 2, which I haven't seen yet, it's meant to be. At least a lot of these big studios are trying to push the boundaries a little bit more because they know that things have started to become a little bit formulaic.
Does that leave you feeling very hopeful for animation as a medium?
I think so. And just coming back from the Annecy Animation Festival in France, which is like the Cannes of animation, there were 17,000 people there. It's the biggest festival they've ever had. And most of those people were students and young people.
I thought you would say most of those people were cartoons.
Yeah. Well, it's animators there was a lot of safari suits and sandals and white socks.
So they were cartoons.
We live up to the stereotype. We all have pale skin and vitamin D deficiencies. Yeah.
Well, that is Memoir of a Snail. I think it's such a beautiful film. I'm so excited for people to go out and see it in the cinema because it's just one of those things to share a film like that. It's like so rich in feeling, especially if you're Australian. Like you see a lot of reflection of life, even to the point where I think in animated form you're able to capture the different feeling of being in Canberra and the different feeling of being in Melbourne somehow in animated form.
Yeah.
So I think people should really go out and see it in the cinema. It's just a beautiful, beautiful film.
Thank you. Thank you.
Weekly.
And we're going to look at some of your weekly choices now.
Sure.
Shall we start in the film from Lasse Hallström?
Yes, My Life as a Dog.
Art House.
My Life as a Dog. This is a film that I hadn't seen since I was 15 years old, but you inspired me to check it out again. It's called Mitt Luf som hund
Yes.
in Swedish. And if those who have not seen it, it's from Swedish director Lasse Hallström, best known for What's Eating Gilbert Grape. And another film that I loved growing up, I loved Cider House Rules growing up. But
yeah.
it's a coming-of-age tale that is kind of like this episodic memory type film about growing up in the 1950s. It's just 1 year of a boy's life. And like your films, it's quite a melancholy, reflective film. But one thing that I found interesting on watching the film this time, that the narration for this film, for My Life as a Dog, it's a rare kind of thing in these kind of memory type films where it's being narrated by the character, not in the distant past or in the distant future where he's an older person looking back on his life, but it's him at that point in time. And I feel like that's very rare. It's not like Stand By Me or anything like that. But what did this film teach you about narration?
Well, look, I love narration, and I use narration because in many cases I have to, because it's a very economical and cheap way of telling a story.
But you use it very beautifully.
It's hard. My editor and I are always trying to, show, don't say. But I remember seeing My Life as a Dog, and I think it just introduced me to European cinema. It had this beautiful innocence. It was heartbreaking because, I won't say what happens or give it away, but a little boy goes to live with his uncle in this Swedish little town, and it's just all these childhood exploits that he gets up to. He's a naughty kid. His brother's even naughtier. But it has this beautiful, poetic, melancholy. It's a sort of film you can just watch over and over again, and it's nourishing and soulful without getting all, whatever.
No, get all whatever. You must get there.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. It's like an antidote to I don't know, when I've watched way too many, poorer things and other films that are overloading, I go back to stuff that's very minimal and simple and goes to the heart of why we all make films. And I've been talking a lot about this, is that, I think as filmmakers, particularly auteurs like me, that you have a degree of responsibility to present material that's not just entertainment. You want it to be challenging, you want it to be nourishing, and you want to make people cry, but also you want it to have a long shelf life. And films like My Life as a Dog really is just as beautiful today as it was back then.
I think it really is. Like, I love the word you use, nourishing. And I think it is like those films that feel like a reflection of life in some way, where, and especially the thing that really I love about coming of age films is that for the most part, everybody has had that shared experience of growing up.
Yeah.
For the most part, there's something in there that everyone has that shared experience. So when you see this, like, I did not grow up in Sweden in 1957, but I see this film and I go, there are so many elements and so many feelings that I've felt, because it's like those feelings of either being not enough or neglected, or those feelings we have adversity, or just like a little memory. Like, so much of this film is a friendship between a young boy and this tomboy, this girl who presents very masculine, in this time. And there's something about like that friendship where you just go, oh, I remember having a friend back then that I haven't seen for like 25, 30 years, but you just have them stuck in your head. I think that's like that nourishing quality where you return back to these films and it enriches your life because you remember how your life was, or you remember sometimes seeing films as like looking at a photo album of your own life again.
Yes.
And I think these kind of films have that quality. And Lasse Hallström, the way he kind of gently brings you through this episodic world, I think that's the real skill and why it's a film that's worth coming back to.
Yeah, and actually it also reminds me of my childhood in the 70s where you were allowed to go out and do whatever you want as long as you were home by dark. And that's probably why, you go into schools back then, everyone had broken arms and eye patches and things because we weren't coddled and we weren't, there was this freedom. And, in this film, there's a wonderful scene where he and his brother and a gang of kids are up to mischief and the brother forces him to put his penis into this glass bottle and his penis gets stuck in the bottle and they have to smash the bottle. And it just reminded me of all the ridiculous things my brother and I, we were vandals when I look back and think of all the things we set on fire and smashed and, and I feel sorry for kids these days because, they're all on their tablets and they're all indoors and they don't get to take risks like we did.
Yeah, I mean, I never put my penis in a glass bottle. I had to smash it. And no one ever forced me to do it either. But it is that thing we have like that weird little thing. And I think that what this film does so well is it has that real hopefulness because you keep on coming back. Like this young boy in this film is going through the hardship of he's been sent away to live with other relatives because he's too much for his family at the moment. And he keeps on coming back to this moment of pure happiness.
Yeah.
It's like this refrain throughout the film where you're seeing him on a shoreline with his mum as he's mucking around with her.
Yes.
And it keeps flashing back to that moment in both sad ways and hopeful ways. And I think the way it goes back to those, it just captures that to reflect on the same memory with different coloring almost and the different feeling upon it. I think it's something you don't see very often.
No,
really.
no, and it's a true art house film, and that sort of period I think it's in the 90s. Was it?
I think late 80s, but one of those breakthrough films in that era of like crossing over from subtitle film to fairly mainstream audiences. Because I read that it played in Melbourne and Sydney for like half a year, basically.
Yeah, it did break through, and I think it was at sort of the same time as early Peter Greenaway films, and I think, and then also preempted films like Delicatessen, and you go in Melbourne, we would come in from the suburbs to the Kino or the Astor or the Valhalla to see these. What did we used to call them? Cosmopolitan films.
That's so. I mean, this is a very cosmopolitan film about a weird little rural life.
Yes,
so I think that's it. Do you have any other fond memories or any other reflections on my life as a dog?
Oh, look, I think it's just, as you say, it's a remembrance. And I think that's, now that I've just done my first memoir film, I love that sort of, all of us get to a point in our lives where we look back, we then become existential and think, well, what is it about? Why are we here? What is it about my childhood I remember? And for me, I remember so much of my childhood, but I don't remember my 20s and 30s much. What is it about our childhoods that sticks? And yet we remember the really weird stuff, not like putting our penises in bottles. And
but if that happens, you'll never forget it. You would never forget that moment.
But I remember watching my brother take wings off flies and then burn them with a magnifying glass. And, now I look back, I think, he was so cruel. But it's those little moments. And I try and have all those little moments in my films. So, in a nutshell, I think My Life as a Dog, it's probably, now that I articulate it, has probably had more of an impact than I remember.
Yeah, I mean, watching them very close to each other, I'd say Memoir of a Snail, and then going back to My Life as a Dog, you do see that kind of connective tissue. I think they would play as a great double bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, a great double bill, but you would need a cry break in between them. But a nice one, because they're both quite uplifting films as well.
Yeah, I don't think they'd exhaust you. I mean, although I do say if you're not an emotional wreck by the end of one of my films, then I've failed as a writer.
Well, we're going to talk about, dare I say it, one of the true great emotional wrecks of films that there ever is. And we even have a copy for you right here to hold up if you would like. We're talking about David Lynch's The Elephant Man.
Drama.
and you've got, is this a criteria? Oh no, Studio Canal.
It's a Studio Canal
it's in the
4K.
metal.
It's a lovely little steel book that we've got here
gorgeous.
in the store. Yeah.
And of course, on the back, the famous line, "I am not an animal, I'm a human being."
When did this film first come into your life?
Well, I went and saw it at the Pinewood Cinema, a little family-run cinema in Melbourne, Mount Waverley, and I knew nothing about it. I thought it was about elephants, like Silence of the Lambs. I thought it was about lambs, and I was way too young. I shouldn't have gone in, and I came out an emotional wreck. But there was so much beauty in the film. It was, William Hurt with all this prosthetics on his
John
face.
Hurt.
John Hurt, sorry,
Yeah.
not William.
Yeah.
That's the other one. And it was a David Lynch film, and of course, it was years before I then saw Eraserhead and Dune and all the other films. But it had this humanity, and I think there's towards the end that scene where he's in the theatre being acknowledged, and for the first time in his life, being acknowledged for being a human, not a circus freak. Just sent a chill up my spine, and then. I can give away the ending, can't I?
Of course. I mean, it's real life.
It's real life.
It's the story of John Merrick or Joseph Merrick, the Elephant Man, one of the most famous men on earth, I would say.
Yeah, and horribly, he was caged like an animal for his, so much of his life, and then at the end he dies because he can only sleep sitting up, so he always has to sit up, and then he just takes his final breath, and now that I talk about it,
something happened to me just then as you were saying it.
Well, it reminded, just as I was saying this, it reminded me of another film, which I don't know if you've seen it, Mask, starring Cher.
Yes.
And
Eric Stoltz.
Eric Stoltz.
Yeah, Eric Stoltz as Rocky Dennis.
Rocky Dennis. And again, about another, person who's
with facial difference,
and is teased and bullied, but it's a survivor. And I think that, again, if we're looking for links to my other films, Grace in this new film of mine is a survivor, and HARVIE KRUMPET's a survivor, and Max is a survivor in Mary and Max. And I think that's what it is that I'm drawn to characters who are tormented, who are misunderstood, who are marginalised, who are the other.
But there's that perseverance.
And trying to get the audience to empathise and put themselves in the shoes of this person who is just tormented, but is actually still, despite all the cruelty, a lovely human being, and has more humanity than these horrible people who make their lives a mess. So, yeah, I mean, I haven't watched The Elephant Man for quite a few years, but I wonder whether it still holds up. I mean, did you've just...
Yeah, I rewatched it a few years ago as well, because I have a similar memory of just that ending. Like I can, as soon as you were saying it, it's in my head. I remember exactly how I felt seeing it the first time, and that moment where he lies down flat. It's just like it flattens you. Like, it's so hard hitting.
That's right. He lies down to die. That's right. He gives
because it's just like he can't hold his head. It's just it's so hard to watch, but just so powerful. And I like that you use like that word, talking about human. Like, there's this humanist quality to all the films that we've been talking about today, that I think it's about that idea of connection, that idea of empathy, and that idea of being able to put yourself in other people's shoes. I think that's the power of cinema. It's like such a great empathy tool where you can experience worlds and lives that are not your own. And with The Elephant Man, for me as well, I think it would have been the first David Lynch film I saw as well, because like, what am I going to watch freaking Blue Velvet when I'm 12 years old or something? But I think it's still always been the access point, and Lynch has not been part of my journey into film. Like, I love a lot of his movies, but he's not one of those people I'm drawn to. But the films I am drawn to are like Elephant Man and The Straight Story, and I love, obviously everyone loves Mulholland Drive, but I think that his two films that, it's interesting because his two most, dare I say, normal, traditional films are Elephant Man and Straight Story. But when you watch them, the dreamlike qualities are all there.
Yeah.
And it's the feeling that you get from them that is it, but it's still a kind of a straight telling of those things.
I think too I think in The Elephant Man is when he really started to experiment with, even though it had to be, for a mainstream audience, he did have a lot of very experimental sound in there, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's where he did his first backwards lion roar. He would play with sound in a very experimental way. And again, I wouldn't say I'm a David Lynch fanatic, and there's certain films of his that just go over my head and I don't not engage with. I mean, certainly love Twin Peaks, the first season, and even his shorts, his animation, But he is such a, he's such an eccentric. I'm so glad he appeared in Spielberg's
I know,
biopic.
playing John Ford, right?
John Ford,
Yeah.
what a perfect
In
role
The
for David
Fablemans.
Lynch.
Yeah.
The other thing too, about The Elephant Man, of course, is black and white.
Yes.
And
That's what I want to ask you next, because you have such interesting use of colour in your films as well.
yeah, well, look, I it sounds pretentious, but I would prefer that all my films are black and white because it doesn't distract you. The colour, you have to focus on the story, and you're really exposing yourself as a writer because there's not much to look at. So the story better be good. But I think films like The Artist, and I was even watching Young Frankenstein too, Mel Brooks. When
Another Mel Brooks, like Elephant Man, is also Mel Brooks' production.
Yes,
Yeah.
and of course Mel Brooks married to
Anne Bancroft.
Anne Bancroft, isn't
Yeah.
it? And so, the black and white. I wouldn't say I love black and white films. I'm a purist in that way, but there's something about black and white. If you choose to go down that path, you better get it right.
Yes.
And certain films don't get it right, but. I also love things like Schindler's List, which black and white with the spot red.
Yeah.
And I sort of stole that for Mary and Max.
Yes.
But I love two films where colour is used as a device, where it's not just... And I find so much animation is too colourful. Every colour of the rainbow is crammed in there. And I have very restrictive colour palettes on my film. So for this new film, blue and green were banned.
Yeah.
And that's really hard because grass is green and sky is blue. So what are we going to do? So everything is these shades of brown, and investors get very nervous. But yeah, I love filmmakers think about every aspect of the film. What can I do differently? How will black and white enhance or detract? The sound, experimenting with sound. And that's why I'm an auteur and a megalomaniac and a control freak, is because I want to be involved with everything. I sit next to my editor for the whole 6 months of the edit. He must want me to leave, but it's because I get to. It's that, as you said earlier, the fingerprints on everything. Yeah.
Staff pick.
Well, allow me to do the hardest thing for a megalomaniac to do. I'm going to take the control out of your hands right now. And it's going to be me presenting with you a film, a staff pick recommendation based on your taste, the conversation that we've had. I had a couple in mind, but I think I'm actually zoned down into one.
Okay.
And now, you're a cinephile. Whenever we've got like a true cinephile in the room, I always feel a little perk of nervousness come through me going, what if this is not good or one that you may have seen? Hopefully I'm putting something new on your radar. But I kind of started thinking a lot about the way you talk about biography and kind of factual filmmaking as something like I study documentary, like that's my area of, I guess, interest. I love everything, but documentary is what I studied. And I wanted to kind of pick you something from there. And there's this film that had been in my head and on my radar for a long time. And I brought it back up because I think, like your work, it captures eccentricity in a really interesting way. And this kind of a specific feeling and a specific kind of world. And it is also melancholy, I'd say. It's a melancholy film and a melancholy exploration of life. It's called I Think We're Alone Now. Have you heard of this?
Oh, I have, but I haven't seen it.
Documentary.
This is a documentary about two stalkers of the 1980s pop star Tiffany, whose
Yes.
most famous song is I Think We're Alone Now.
Yeah.
One of them is a man who has Asperger's, and the other person is an intersex person.
Okay.
And they both have very interesting fascinations with this person. I think it works best when this film is about our interest and fascination with celebrity and how we relate to them and how they kind of relate to our own world, because it's really a film about obsession, but because it has this really eccentric way in and this odd way in. Another reason I thought about it kind of worked perfectly is I know the filmmaker Sean Donnelly, he studied animation. And he was making a short film where they were doing street casting. They came across this man, Jeff, who is the subject of this film. And they were like, who is this guy? He's so interesting. interesting. And he started talking to them about Tiffany, and they end up making a documentary about him.
Okay.
And I think that when this film really works best as well is the other character, who is this intersex person who's now living for the first time in a more female experience.
Right.
The way they talk about Tiffany is so powerful in like how they see the reflection of themselves in her,
okay.
and how they feel seen when they see her. There's something about that. I go, oh, this film, there's something quite deeper and special in there. But it's been one that's been on my radar a long time, and I thought it would be perfect one to recommend you today.
Alex, it even looks like an Adam Elliot film.
It certainly does.
You know, I love this text, this font up here already reminds me of another favourite film of mine, Napoleon Dynamite.
Yes.
So it's got, and that minimalist, I love minimalist design, and I'm always striving to declutter my films. And
you got a long way to go if you're trying to declutter your films, I'd say.
And that guy there, you know, I've drawn that character many times.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it. I mean, I love the underbite already going on. And that, I mean, I've got a friend of mine who I will watch this with. She loves stalker films. She loves anything to do with serial killers.
Yes.
I mean, documentaries on serial killers. So, and it's funny because I do watch... You know, I don't watch a lot of animation. I actually, even on the plane coming back from Spain, I watched a documentary on stuttering, and what else? There was 2 or 3 documentaries, and I just thought, oh, I've got to catch up on all my docos, and that's what I'm sort of. It links to my films, which have that documentary flavour to them.
Okay, I nailed it today.
So
Hell
you
yes.
did nail it.
Yes.
You know what? I had a hunch you were going to bring out a film which I want to rewatch. Do you remember Gumbo?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Because a lot of people over the years have said Gumbo.
The Harmony Korine film, right?
Oh, I can't remember. It was a little kid with a rabbit ears.
Yeah, that's it.
Saw that somewhere in Melbourne back in the 90s. But no, perfect choice.
I think you'll dig it. And I love that you mentioned like that typeface there because it's very hand-drawn. All the little like title cards when you're introducing a talking head subject or whatever, they are written on little scraps of paper that the filmmaker literally holds up in front of them when they're in shot. And I go, oh, that's such a little magic touch.
Well, that's the thing. Obviously I love anything handmade. And in my films too, I do all the handwriting, even the title to the film.
Well, you have to also design every single thing, like Chico roll wrappers and like every little detail that in a normal, traditional live action film would just be a given because you can buy the prop or you can just show it. You have to design every single thing.
Well, there's this shot in the film where Pinky, Jackie Weaver's character's in a supermarket dressed up as a pineapple, handing out pineapple chunks. And it's only on screen for 10 seconds or something. And I hand drew every single item on the shelves in the supermarket because I've got OCD and I just had to do it. I'm a megalomaniac. And
I would love you to just draw a whole section of our store. Just go, let's pick a section. You can draw it all, hand draw every item on the shelf.
Well, if I don't draw each day, I feel incomplete, and drawing is my yoga, and it's my I have to draw.
Well, you can draw us anything you want, anytime, mate, anytime. But thank you so much, Adam Elliot, for joining us here in the Last Video Store. And hopefully you come back and return these movies to us one day.
I will, I promise, and I'll rewind them.
Rewind them, please, please, please. Even the DVDs, even the Blu-rays, you have to rewind them. That's all we ask from you. We've got a beautiful stack of films. You've got Memoir of a Snail, which you can see in cinemas right now. You've got Lassie Holstrom's My Life as a Dog. You've got Elephant Man from David Lynch. And now you've got your recommendation, I Think We're Alone Now, from Sean Donnelly.
Can't wait.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
The Last Video Store.
Thank you for checking out The Last Video Store with me, your host, Alexi Toliopoulos. Please subscribe, follow, share the podcast amongst your friends as well. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TikTok, Instagram, Last Video Store Batuta. So check us out and share us in all of those places. And if you want your own bespoke customized recommendation from me, you can submit an online order at any of those places, in a comment, in a 5-star review, with your weeklies and your new release pick. And I will come to you like I did at the top of this episode and give you a recommendation based on your taste. So thank you very much. Love you. Love movies.